Hey, good morning everyone. Dr. Shook here. Hope you're doing well today. Today I want to share with you something that I'm working with, an issue I'm working with on one of my cases. This has to do with heartburn. And this is such an important subject to discuss because it has so many significant health implications. And quite frankly, the cause of the heartburn that most people are being treated for, that they have too much acid, is incorrect. It is incorrect. The mechanism is incorrect. People are told that they have heartburn because they have stress, because they're eating spicy foods, and they see these as regular triggers. This is primarily an incorrect statement. We've known since 1983 when there were two Australian researchers. They discovered the bacteria H. pylori. It's the most common bacterial infection. It infects the stomach. They discovered it, and they proposed that it was the cause of gastritis, the inflammation of the gastric lining, the stomach lining, and ulcers, and that it created all of these problems with the digestive function. And no one believed them. And so one of the doctors actually received a Nobel Prize. He infected himself and proved through self-inoculation with the bacteria that it caused ulcers and gastritis. They did an endoscopy. They looked down his throat. They did a biopsy of his stomach gastric wall and showed that the bacteria was present in the ulcers. And that was the only way that they were taken seriously, as this bacteria being a cause for gastritis and ulcers. Now, the thing that is so significant about this is that most people are being treated for having too much stomach acid because they're getting reflux and they're getting heartburn. And the reality of the mechanism is, for the majority of people, is that H. pylori, they have H. pylori infections. This is a highly transmissible infection. If you're sharing food with someone, you're sharing, they take a bite with their fork or utensil, you take a bite, it is highly transmissible. You will pass it to the other person. It is usually, it occurs in families. So if one person has it, you really need to test everyone. But the mechanism is that this bacteria burrows into the stomach lining. And when it burrows into the stomach lining, it can create inflammation. You can get an immune response and gastritis. You can develop ulcers. Okay, so that's one of the signs of it. But it can be totally silent. Once it burrows into the stomach, though, it decreases the ability of the parietal cells of the stomach to produce acid. So it decreases the concentration of acid in the stomach. So you actually have lower acidity. The acid is not concentrated as much as it would normally be when H. pylori is not present. And what results is that your food does not digest as well, and it can actually sit in the stomach. And actually, one of the signs that you might be dealing with this is that you don't digest proteins well. Like you eat protein or you eat eggs or meat, and it just feels like it sits there and it's heavy. That is a sign that you do not have a good concentration of stomach acid. Especially if you're dealing with heartburn or some of these other symptoms, you for sure need to be checked for H. pylori. That can be one of the signs, but the acid decreases the ability of the stomach to concentrate the acidity, so therefore the food does not get digested as well, and it disrupts your entire digestive tract below the stomach. So it leads to reflux because the low acidity mix of food and acid in the stomach, when the stomach churns and works to mix the acid into the food and works to break it down, if the acidity is lower in the stomach, you will often get the contraction of the stomach will cause the food to be pushed up through into the esophagus. Now, normally, when the acid concentration is high enough in the stomach, you're going to get a contraction of the muscular valve at the top of the stomach, and it's going to squeeze tight, and it's going to keep as the stomach churns, it's going to prevent the stomach from pushing the food up into the esophagus, which will cause a reflux. But if the acid is low in the stomach, this can actually, that sphincter may not close as tightly, and that can cause regurgitation of the food. And even if the stomach acid is lower in concentration, it's still acid. So it's going to burn, right? So then you get these symptoms of heartburn. You're like, oh my gosh, I have too much acid. That is not typically correct. It's actually that the acid is too low. You're not getting the closure, the tight neurological reflex to close those valves. And then the food sits in the stomach too long. When there's churning in the stomach, it pushes it up into the esophagus. And by treating it with antacids and acid blockers, you're actually perpetuating it. You're making yourself more likely to have other infections as well, and you're disrupting your entire digestive tract below. And the reason that you're making yourself, you're perpetuating it is because one thing that could be protective to you would be to have sufficient acidity. So H. pylori don't thrive in a good, healthy, acidic environment. Other bacteria that may be in the food that you're eating, those don't like acidic environments either. So when your acid is low and you're further suppressing your acidity, you're making yourself more susceptible to these pathogens. Now, in addition to that, the acid in the stomach, if the acid concentration's low, right, it's still acidic, but it's low. When the food moves from your stomach, the first place it goes as it goes further down the digestive tract is into the first part of the small intestine, where your gallbladder and your pancreas release enzymes and bile into the food to further digest it. So if you don't have adequate acidity, when the food moves into this first part of the small intestine, you don't get a good contracture of the gallbladder, you don't get a good release of the enzymes from the pancreas, and this can lead to poor digestion of your food. This can lead to bacterial imbalances in the gut. This can lead to all kinds of digestive upset and bloating, and create all kinds of problems. And it can all be from that acidity, or that poor acidity. So this is something that needs to be taken very seriously. So the other problems with H. pylori, if this isn't enough, but the other problems is that H. pylori is a known trigger for many different health conditions. It's known to create ulcers and gastritis, so inflammation of the intestinal of the stomach lining. It's known to be a risk factor for cancer, for gastric cancer, because of the perpetual inflammation it creates. It's known to be a very significant trigger of vascular inflammation and heart disease. I want you to think about that. The number one killer, heart disease, is a major trigger of those things, because it can trigger very significant inflammatory responses against the vascular lining, and it can lead to atherosclerosis. This is well documented, 1,000+ studies on this. And then lastly, and just as important, is that it is a known trigger for autoimmune disease, in particular Hashimoto's, and it can lead to, and it does this, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, the main cause of low thyroid, because it has similar proteins in the bacteria that are found in the thyroid. So the immune system, while it's attacking H. pylori, may mistakenly attack your thyroid because of similar protein structures. So with all this, the main thing that I want to share is, if you have heartburn, or reflux, you absolutely have to find out if you have H. pylori. And sometimes the antibody testing, so the way that we typically work it up is, first line is a blood antibody test against H. pylori, which can be negative, can have a false negative. Then a stool panel to see if it's in the stool, and then you can also do a breath test where you drink a solution and then you exhale, and those can all be great ways. Another thing you can try is like a apple cider vinegar challenge, where you take like a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, you dilute it really well with water, drink it with a straw, typically on an empty stomach. If you have burning, that's not a good sign. That's a sign that your gastric lining is inflamed, and you need to actually work on supporting that gastric lining, typically before you add acid. But one of the things that often help is adding acid. If you find that when you drink the apple cider vinegar that your acid is, or that you feel better and your digestion's better, that's a sign that your acidity is too low. And you can use apple cider vinegar, you can use HCl support, a supplement. Those are all things that are possible, but you have to get to the root cause of this. This is a major, major issue. And so I see this a lot working with Hashimoto's, and heartburn is such a major thing, that a major widespread problem, that I wanted to make sure I shared this with y'all. But if you need help with anything, if you need help working through any of these problems, I work with people around the world, across the United States, via telemedicine, to help them investigate their health challenges and put together specific plans, help them access advanced diagnostic testing to get to the root cause of these things. But anyway, I do appreciate y'all. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you